Welcome to that episode of Just More Fix. This is James. With me this episode is Lacey.
Hey.
You can find us online at justmorefix.com or on Twitter at justmorefix. If you like us, you can support us at Patreon, and you can give us a rating and review at iTunes or wherever you find us at. In this episode, we're going to talk about character creation with constraints. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix.
Ely from the Starlight Tribune, an Arrow TV show fan podcast, part of the Geek network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other amazing geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to Just One More Fix. Couple quick announcements before we get things rolling here today. First off, you may have noticed that our release schedule for the Night Witches has been a little interrupted, but that's because we had a sort of a recording malfunction, and some of the audio we actually had thought we lost. I was able to recover the entirety of Session 7, so it's sort of slowed down our editing process, but it looks like I will have the next episode ready to release on this coming Friday, so look for that coming to you guys this Friday, and as always, as soon as it is done, it will go to our Patreon. And we actually have quite a bit of backlog of recording for Night Witches now, so they should start coming out on the Patreon pretty quickly, because we have Sessions 7, 8, and 9 all as a backlog now. So lots of content to come, and we really want to make sure to get Session 7 to you out, because there's a lot of, well, terrible things that happen, and amazing drama that happens in Session 7, and we really wanted to sort of...
It's a little bit more political espionage than we've encountered in previous sessions.
Correct. And so rather than just scrapping that entire session and continuing with it missing, we decided to sort of delay releasing some things to see if we could recover the audio. And you'll notice if you listen to them that the audio quality may be off a little bit, but it's not bad. It's not quite our normal standard, I would say, but it's still it's still passable.
Instead of not having it at all. So
true story.
Quit whining.
But the audio is pretty good still. It's still in pretty good shape. So if it was really bad, I wouldn't release it. But there are some issues that I'm not going to be able to fix with some of the audio. But you guys will still have all of Session 7, which it's actually a longer session. Unedited, it's 5 hours and 40 minutes. So I'm not sure what that'll turn into as it gets cut down into episodes and edited. But there was a lot of content that happened in that game session, and I didn't want to lose the whole thing. Also, we celebrated, we just recorded Session 9, and we celebrated our 1-year anniversary of Night Witches, which is pretty awesome. So we never really intended to do any actual play stuff, and just sort of stumbled into it and really liked the Night Witches game. We had a good group of players that I thought would work well for that game, and it has been amazing and a really great game.
A year.
And it's been a year, yeah, true.
Every session that we sit down now, I'm like, somebody's going to die this session. And it hasn't happened yet. Next session.
You know what? Maybe
I think I only have like 2 more marks on my.
Yeah.
And I think Holly only has 1.
Mm-hmm.
So if
Chansey has several, and Carrie has several as well.
Yeah, but if we take enemy fire in a plane in the next session, if me and Holly are in the plane that takes fire, probably one
everyone's
of us is
going
die.
down a fiery wreck. True story. True story. So that game has been a lot of fun, and it's worth checking out if you guys haven't listened to it yet. I believe there's 20 episodes of it posted so far. Each episode is about 45 minutes to an hour and 15, give or take a little bit. And it's just been a lot of fun, and it's a great way to get kind of introduced to Powered by the Apocalypse style gaming, because there's not a lot of... There's not a tremendous amount of rules in PBTA, but we do feature them in the recording, and you get to kind of see how those situations get negotiated at the table in the moment. So if you're looking for an introduction to PBTA gaming, it's a good place to start. So yeah, so I guess just happy Night Witches anniversary, I suppose, because we're coming up on our 2nd or 3rd anniversary for the podcast here pretty soon. So it's been a good time.
Anniversary, yes, we're past 100 episodes.
Well, we're past 100 normal episodes.
1,000 episodes.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's kind of weird, though, because we've got like 24-ish or so actual play episodes, 30 or so reviews, and then 120 normal episodes. So we've actually got quite a bit of content we've put out there over the course of time.
Absolutely blows my mind.
Yeah. Who'd have thunk, right? Good time.
If you'd ask me, I'd be like, I don't know, probably like 50.
Well, it's been fun, and it's been a good time, and it's sort of led into a lot of other things. Now we're sort of like getting into producing some zines and the Patreon and all kinds of other cool projects that we're sort of getting involved with and doing, along with all of the Night Witches stuff that you can get early access to on our Patreon. We are in process of producing our quarterly zine, and the first one is coming out this month. So it looks like I have our artist lined out for the 2 pieces of artwork that I need to still get worked out. So the PDF at the very minimum will be released on time in April, probably in about 1 or 2 weeks. I've got one last quick editing pass to go through it, and then it'll be ready to go. The print version may be a week or 2 late, depending on when the 2 pieces of artwork come in to get added, but I will be releasing the PDF as soon as it's ready to go, minus those 2 pieces of artwork, and then we'll add those 2 pieces once I get them so that we can get that out there to all of our Patreon supporters. So
I know I'm biased, but I think it's really good.
So I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the artists that I think we have lined up. It looks like they're stylistically, they match up very well with what the sort of the visual thing that I'm going for. And I think that if it works, we're probably going to keep that same visual look throughout the foreseeable future of our zine line, I guess, however you want to say that. And lots of good things and lots of fun. So if you are interested...
And then the second year, anime.
And no. So if you're interested in getting a hold of the very first, the inaugural Just One More Fix zine, it is going to be
limited edition run, possibly collector's edition.
Yeah, okay. It is the first zine is called Worms, and it is based off of our creature feature episode that we featured. I think episode 50, 55, somewhere in that range. And so, been a lot of fun. Playtested it several times. Had a great time. And if you support us on Kickstarter before the end of April, then you can get access to that. And depending on where you choose to support us at, you can get either the PDF or the PDF and an actual print copy of it. The final announcement is that I'm not entirely certain that we're going to be able to pull off an Indie RPG Day in May because the race season is coming up, and because of my work schedule, it's going to be pretty awful this month, or next month, I suppose. So we're not sure we're going to be able to fit in an indie RPG Day, which is a bummer. So, but we're going to try and work something out. And even if we can't do one in May, we're probably doing in early June. But those aren't...
I mean, like, not to be blasphemous, but I suppose I could do it without you.
I kind of thought that, and I was like, I didn't want to...
It didn't really occur to me until right this minute that was a thing that I could do.
I didn't want to railroad you into it, but I was kind of like, you don't actually need me. I think you've got enough, street cred that you can pull this off on your own. I'm like,
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure you could pull it off 50% of the time, every time, right? Isn't that how that works? So, but we'll see. So you may have an indie RPG Day.
Literally making it up as I go.
Featuring Lacey. Right on. So we'll work that out in details to come, and we'll post that on our Twitter and on our Facebook as we always do, as well as at the game page on their Facebook page for the game store we run at.
I had the best idea.
What's that?
For my game, by the way.
Oh, right on.
For the Pip System game. And I don't know if I want to tell you or make you run through it and surprise you.
Well, don't tell me.
But I need to share it with someone soon, or it's going to explode.
Okay, well.
It's just amazing.
Right on. All right, so today we're going to talk about character creation, and specifically about character or restraints put on character creation. So
character restraints.
Character restraints. Yeah. So a couple weeks ago, I'm not sure if it made it into the actual episode or if it was just in sort of like the pre-show and raw audio. We were talking.
It's in there because we were talking. It was in the midst of our talking about the hex crawl system.
Okay, that's right.
I mentioned it about what I liked or didn't like and how the characters were different. And you had mentioned the Witches game. You mentioned how those characters were each very unique and different. And I think that's how we got off on that subject anyways. But I had said that was because of the constraints that were put on you guys during character creation.
Mm-hmm.
So the exact, I guess, fundamentals of those characters are identical. Mm-hmm. But the flavor was added outside of what the system actually allows for in order to make them different.
Right. So there are... I think initially to start this off, I think we should kind of maybe break this down and focus on there are games that are basically set up initially. Obviously, you can do anything you want with any game, very clearly, right? Mm-hmm. But initially they're set up in that there are either no constraints in some game other than genre constraints, right? Which are pretty broad, generally speaking. And then there are other games where there are very specific constraints put on you, right? So no constraints would be games like D&D or any other fantasy style game, right?
Well,
so
to be fair, the constraints that we're talking about for this game were largely GM imposed.
yeah, no. I agree. But I think to draw a distinction between the two, initially, we should probably focus on how some games are built that way and others are not.
Yeah, there is a ton of variety in D&D.
Right.
As far as character, race, background, and
Class, all that stuff. And that includes D&D, Pathfinder, OSR stuff, so BX, Lamentations, all that kind of stuff. And I might even throw like...
Lamentations gives you like a third as many choices, maybe less.
Right.
Than
But still a lot of choices.
D&D.
Right. But still a ton of choices, really.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said, I would even throw One Ring in there because there's a lot of variation in One Ring, right? It just says the only conceit is you have to be in Tolkien's universe, essentially, right?
The life paths in Burning Wheel are
Wide open.
especially when you add in how many different choices you can make for how many years you
True, very true.
Like mathematically, once you start adding in the exponents.
So it's like the vast majority of fantasy is pretty open, right? But I would even say games like Warhammer 40K, whether that's Dark Heresy or that kind of stuff, pretty wide open. Unless the GM puts specific constraints on you for Star Wars, still pretty wide open. Unless you say I'm going to run a Jedi game or something, still pretty wide open. Shadowrun, lots of these games are built around...
Vampire.
Vampire. Around very broad ideas, right? But then on the other side of that, you get games like Mouse Guard, right? Very focused. You have to be part of the Mouse Guard. That's very constraining in a way.
You're
like
always a mouse.
Yeah.
You're never going to not be a mouse.
And not even you're a mouse, but you're also part of this knightly goodly order, right? So it's even narrower than that. Bluebeard's Bride, I think, is probably the most narrowly focused. You are a specific aspect of the personality of one woman, right? I don't know that you get any narrower than that, right? And I say that
pretty fair.
Not as a criticism. I think it's a feature of the game, right? And that's, I think, where the sweet spot of this lies. And I think a lot of maybe not in second edition Apocalypse World, but definitely in first edition of Apocalypse World, the way most PBTA games are sort of structured, your genre constraints, yes, but your character is very focused in what you're going to be. You're the Jane of the group. You're the Captain, Malcolm Reynolds of the group. You're whatever it is.
And that's basically what that system is designed to do. And that to me is a boon of Apocalypse World.
I agree.
Character creation is 3 or 4 decisions, and then you're off and running, and everybody understands the archetype.
I think, so when you have the playbook in front of you, you're 100% right. It's like 3 or 4 decisions, right? But I feel like the bigger decision is which playbook do I pick?
Okay, that's fair. You spend a fair amount of time kind of.
Because that's very specifically guides, what you are. Now, there are some PBTA games where it sort of shifts that, like Spirit of 77. You have 2 different aspects that you're combining, lots of variation, lots of different, choices to make there. I think that when you compare the two things side by side, and I don't think there's a whole lot of need to go into the openness of D&D or Shadowrun or Pathfinder or any of that kind of stuff, right? It's pretty clear, right? So leaving aside the games where we have a more open system and we put constraints on it, setting that aside for a discussion here in a minute, do you think that those games are inherently more impactful or better characters because of the way they're designed?
Which game?
One versus the other. This like PBTA or whatever, right? And I don't want to frame this up as like a Powered by the Apocalypse versus Pathfinder D&D. That's not what I'm trying to get at. I guess what I'm trying, because there's lots of games to do, like World of Dew.
I don't think so. So what happens for me when I sit down to play let's say I sit down to play a D&D game. So Apocalypse World largely in my head exists as a one-shot, which sounds dumb because we've been playing Night Witches for a year. So then I had to rethink about it. Like, okay, well, there's also Monster Hearts. So the difference for me is D&D is me sitting down and thinking about who my character is before I start playing. And I try to capture that as best as I can on this sheet of paper, and it will evolve some.
And that's for D&D?
That's for D&D type systems.
Right.
So fantasy type systems.
More open stuff.
Where I'm picking race, class, background, that kind of thing. So I'm laying out who I am as I do this, right? Or maybe even beforehand, and then I go through and try and mechanically represent that on paper. When I sit down to play Powered by the Apocalypse, I pick a character archetype that I think is interesting, and I start playing it, and I figure out who that character is as I'm playing it. And that's been pretty much consistently true for every Powered by the Apocalypse game I've played that's been running longer than a one-shot, which is just, me trying to stereotype the archetype as best as I can for one session to go balls to the wall, kind of.
Well, I feel like that's sort of what it's designed for, right? And
it's just sort of like, are you front-loading the character, or are you back-loading the character?
So, to be completely open and upfront about this, I'm not sure where I come down on this, right? And I know I kind of poo-poo D&D a lot sometimes or whatever, but I really am honestly not sure where I think is the better approach. So on one hand, I feel like sometimes when you make a D&D character, right, and I say, I'm going to make a rogue or whatever, okay? Let's say rogue for this example. And I think, I don't want to make the stereotypical rogue. I want to make rogue with a twist. So it's my rogue, not just cookie cutter stamp, here's a rogue, here's a rogue, here's a rogue, here's a rogue, right? Mm-hmm. So I find some way to put my own little flavor on it and twist on it, right? Now that's the approach that I generally take to fantasy style gaming or whatever. And that includes if I was going to make an Only War character or a Dark Heresy character, I'm going to make a cleric of, for 40K. But I want my twist on it, right? Because it's so big and broad. So I want to draw it down to a specialty and how my cleric or my rogue is different than everyone else. At the same time, when I sit down to play a PBTA game, I do the exact opposite. I say, I'm playing the Jane in this world. I'm going to be the most Jane of Janes that the Jane can be, right?
Right.
I'm going to carry big guns, and I'm going to bust out Vera, and I'm going to gun down lots of people, and I'm going to be the most Jane of Janes, right? And I just realized that, like, quite literally...
I really want to play Firefly Powered by the Apocalypse now. Why does that not exist yet?
I really think that you can do it with some small modifications with regular PBTA. Because, you can make the hard holder...
Sorry to distract.
No. I have already had this thought, and I just haven't pulled the trigger on it because my PBTA focus is solely on troubadours right now, so...
Yeah. Well, it's also an intellectual property, so,
No, but we could very easily modify it to work at our table.
Home table.
Yeah, absolutely. Very easily. And that may be a discussion, that's maybe a discussion or a blog post or something for Patreon or the website or whatever. We can get to that later. But it's weird in my mind in that when I'm making a PBTA character, the playbooks are largely, if we're being honest, essentially classes, right? Mm-hmm. But I approach them differently, and I don't know if that's because, or not even, I don't know. I'm reasonably certain that's because of baggage that I bring to the table. So when I sit down to play PBTA, I'm like, this playbook is the gun lugger, right? That's the Jane. So that's what I'm going to do.
That's part of it, but it's also a little bit about balance in how the world is created. Because if we sit down to play a D&D game, if I offer you no constraints as a GM, you're probably going to be like, oh, well, you're already playing a rogue, and you're playing a wizard, and you're a cleric. I think I'm going to be a fighter, because that's how you balance the party in that type of game that you're used to playing. And the same is true for Apocalypse World. It's just a different sort of symmetry.
But in a way, okay, yes and no, because in a way, when D&D, when you're picking classes, or any kind of class-based system, there is a reason to have different classes and specific classes in the group because it's a sort of tactical advantage, right? In a PBTA game, there's not necessarily automatically going to be a tactical advantage if you don't have a fighter, cleric, wizard, rogue, right?
Yeah, but a little bit.
I don't think this is detrimental to not have...
Also, you can't have, 3 or 4 of the same thing in Apocalypse.
No, I agree. I agree.
Each one is a single print, so you have to play a different thing.
Okay, so I think we're sort of shifting off a little bit here from, I guess where I wanted to go with this maybe is complexity of character, right? So when I make a gun lugger, let's stick with that example, right? In Apocalypse World, fundamentally that character is basically just either somewhere between a fighter and a barbarian, right? Mm-hmm. But when I finish that character, I feel like I have a more well-rounded person versus if I just made a D&D fighter or a D&D barbarian. Now, I will acknowledge that there are mechanisms in Apocalypse World, like history and different things, that will sort of aid to you connecting the character to the world. But why does that happen?
But aside from the history and all of that, when you choose a stat in Apocalypse World, aside from your core 3 or 4 stats, whatever, you're assigning an attribute to yourself. It's not just a number. So I'm given a description of what the gunlugger is.
Right.
And so that's kind of my general archetype. And then when I pick my main ability and my one or two other abilities that I have, that also comes with a blurb, and it's given a unique name that sort of defines aspects of my personality aside from just what the move does.
Wait a minute. Say that again.
So, for example, in Night Witches, right? Okay. The skills I choose, to me, inform aspects of my personality.
Mean moves,
yeah, the moves I choose informs aspects of my personality, rather in addition to adding actual things that my character can do and to physically affect the world. So the fact that I'm a sparrow that chose to take dark bargain instead of ghosts, like even just the name is kind of iconic and it defines an aspect of my personality. And then the text of what that is further defines the character that I'm playing. It does more than just add a stat
I see
to
what
my
you're saying.
character
Right.
sheet.
So I'm seeing the exact same thing as what we're talking about already, just in a different sense. So stay with me here for a minute, okay? So in the D&D case, right, my choices are series of classes, series of races, right? And then it breaks down list of feats, list of abilities, list of spells, right? Whereas on the other side of this, sticking with the PBTA example, right, your initial choices, list of archetypes, basically, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's not a tremendous list of moves to choose from. Generally speaking, it's between 5 and 3. So instead of having 10 feats to choose from, I only have 3 moves to choose from. So again, we're getting down where it's pared down. You don't have to look at 10 different things and how they affect each other. There's only 3. And then even if you pick one, if you get an additional move, it's still only one of those 3 to 5 choices. So is it because every choice is pared down?
No, I think it's because when I pick a move, it doesn't just tell you what I do, it tells you how I accomplish tasks.
Right. So
that's a personality thing.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. I didn't finish the second part of that, I guess, is that while it's pared down, it pairs that archetype down even more, right? So I'm the gunlugger, and am I like the balls out sort of shoot holes in everything?
I guess that makes sense, and maybe that's why I feel like the character develops more as you play more, because then you gain more moves and you further define the person that you are in the game.
Okay. But don't you see that same thing happening when you choose feats and abilities in D&D?
No.
Why not?
Because the experience to me is a pool of things that happens. It's not, I did this thing, now I'm taking an advancement, and as a result, I'm trying to choose an advancement that reflects whatever has just happened to me in game, or what I would like to be able to accomplish from here on out. It is literally just like math to me.
More tactical.
Like, okay, I have 3,000 experience, now I get to pick a feat. Like, okay, I have whatever, point blank.
Right.
I don't remember.
Whatever it is.
Right now, I have cleave. Greater cleave it is.
Right.
You know? I'm now even better at cleaving things in twain.
But don't you see that?
I mean, I guess it kind of informs your personality as far as like, I'm a bloodthirsty barbarian or something, but it doesn't really describe how.
I get it. Now, let me ask you, because most of those feats generally speaking, are more tactical in nature, right? And a lot of times,
it feels more like wargaming than story gaming.
I agree. So is that because if there were moves or... Okay,
and
I have a great example now. Let's take it out of the D&D context, okay, and put it into the Fate context, because there's nothing more broad, in fact. I don't know that there's a game other than GURPS that is more broad than Fate. Mm-hmm. Okay? So when you choose stunts, which functionally kind of work similar to feats, right? Now, let's say I choose stunts that are less tactical in nature and more social role-playing mental in nature. Do you feel like that informs the character differently than a stunt that would give you a +2 when you're rolling your physique, or +2 when you're rolling your fight?
Not necessarily. No.
Do you see the distinction between? Because I was going to say, what if there were feats that were social?
I see what you're trying to get at, but the thing is, I feel the same way about Vampire that I feel about D&D, in that I'm front-loading character creation for most of it. And that's a very
Okay,
social
so
game.
how so for Vampire? Because Vampire, like you said, is a very social game, generally speaking. Combat is usually, at least at our table, sort of like a mechanism of last resort, right? It's like the nuclear option or whatever.
Right.
So how is it different with Vampire than it is with a Pathfinder-y D&D OSR game?
That's what I'm saying is it's not different.
So the dots you put on the paper for subterfuge and empathy functionally aren't any different for you when you make your character?
Strength or dex or lock picking. No.
Okay.
It's exactly the same thing.
No, I agree. I understand those are basically like sort of like skills and abilities, right?
Like why I have to have a character concept in mind when I sit down so that then I can fit the dots to the concept I already have, as opposed to I pick this set of things that are going to be my dots and...
Okay. So I think we're kind of straying a little bit here. What if...
And I don't think... Okay, the reason why I don't think that I'm alone in this opinion is because of the background package that's added to D&D 5th edition. That, to me, seems like a direct attempt to fix this issue of not having enough character personality when you're creating characters. And for people that aren't having a concept out the gate and just filling dots on paper, now I'm forcing you to kind of make a decision about who your character is and what your background was. It's directly what your background was before you became an adventurer.
Right. So incorporate it or not as much as you want, but you have to choose something.
Yes.
Okay. That's kind of where I was going, because I realize the feats we're discussing and talking about are more of a Pathfinder 3rd edition thing as opposed to an actual current D&D thing, right? Because I think D&D has done a really good job of taking strides towards making story elements more prominent, right? Because I don't think you can leave the tactical thing, the tactical thing, you can't leave that entirely, because that's fundamentally a part of D&D, right? And you have to have that because it's D&D, but I do think that you can bring story elements more to the forefront, and I think I've done a good job of that. But with that conceit in mind, let's kind of get to what provoked this conversation, I guess, really, which is this Witches game is kind of where it's birthed from. So we have a Lamentations game, right, that is where me, Lee, and Carrie all have witches, essentially, right? That's our class. And that was the conceit of the game, is that all three of us had to be witches. Now, while all three of us are the exact same character, or I'm not sorry, exact same class, we are...
You guys are all the same character.
Yeah, no. That's Bluebeard's Bride. We're all the same class. We are drastically different from one another. And then part of that was also communication at the table. Hey, I'm going to play more of this, like we kind of broke up the feminine aspects, I guess, like the generic ones, right? So like there's the virgin, the crone, and the mother, right? And we kind of broke those apart and kind of divvied them up.
I don't know what game you were sitting at, but there was no, I don't think, maybe you're the mother a little bit.
I'm the more motherly one.
But Lee is definitely the fatale. He's not the crone.
No, I guess there's four. Okay, yeah, I agree. We don't really have a crone.
You're all crones.
My character is somewhere between a mother. It's like 1 foot in the mother zone and 1 foot in the crone zone, right?
I would agree with that.
The crone zone. Right on. Like that's so. It's interesting to me because you put constraints on us initially and said this is the class you have to play, right? And then we actually put even more archetypal constraints on our characters and said, okay, so you're going to make this one. So you're the witch, you're the virgin witch, right? And you're the witch, you're the fatale witch. And I'm there's only, 2 other boxes to put in. So let's put a foot in both, right? But
is that like when you were actually sitting down to make your characters, was that the actual conversation that was happening? Or were you like, this is what I'm going to be good at. This is what you're going to be good at. Was it more of a skill-based conversation, or was it actually like personality aspect-based?
It wasn't skill-based at all. And I don't know if this is unique to our table, and it may not be, or it might be, I don't really know. But at our table, we have a general conceit of understanding the way the stories work, right? And archetypes, and who is going to fit what role. Not every time, but I'm going to make the lead character in this, like the more outgoing character in this game or whatever. And the next time I might not. I might make the more reserved, brainy character, right? And as a group, we talked about what characters we want. It's like Carrie mentioned that she wanted to play a younger character that was sort of inexperienced and new, right? And I thought, okay, that's cool. And I think this might tie back to for me, Bluebeard's Bride. Female, I don't really play female characters because it's kind of funny for me, right? And I understand the parental instinct, obviously, right? So the tapping into the mother archetype is easier for me in a lot of ways, right? Because I can at least at some level understand that, right? I can understand Mama Bear mode, right? That's pretty easy. So I gravitated towards that, and I was like, I think I'm going to make a character that way, and I wanted to just do something a little different, right? Because I don't play sort of like matronly look over the group kind of characters generally, and I wanted to do something that was different, to be honest. And then with that, I don't know if it's because I did something different that Lee did something completely different from what he does normally, right? Because
Lee would never have played a female character on his own.
Right.
I think that's part of it, really. It's just like I gave him permission to do that. So then he was like,
All right, both feet, we're jumping in, right? But it really, so it wasn't skill-based. It developed organically at the table as sort of like, maybe me and Lee deferred to her initially, like, choose what you want to do. And because my concept wasn't hardened yet. It was sort of like this amoeba blob, right? Mm-hmm. And then as things got eliminated, it sort of pared it down for me so I could make my character special, right? And I do think it bears mentioning.
I would like to add, I don't think you guys deferred to Carrie because she's female. Usually when Carrie sits down at the table and I pitch her an idea, she has a character concept in mind almost immediately.
Yeah.
And she knows exactly what she wants to do. And it's not like,
I
you're
agree.
A girl, I'm going to let you go first because you play a girl in real life all the time, so I'm just going to see what you would like to do.
No, and, you know and I mean? Generally speaking, when I make characters, my character concept is pretty slow to develop. And then as soon as but that's because I find it hard to find something to hook into, right? Mm-hmm. But then once I hook into something, then it coalesces very quickly for me, right? And that's sort of what happened. So it was like, well, this thing is gone and I don't want to double up on what she's doing. So, and then it developed from there. But I guess, I don't know. I just feel like, I kind of wonder, in that game, our characters are very well developed and we all have our very own specific roles. But I kind of wonder if we had all played wizards, if that thing would have happened the same way, as opposed to having this sort of like archetypal witch character. Do you know what I'm saying? Does it make sense?
Yeah, but it's not just that you're a witch either. You all had to be female. Like if I'd have been like, okay, you guys all have to be wizards. Okay. And you all also have to be male. Or
well, that female and witch thing to me in my mind goes together because warlock is not compelling. I find it boring, if I'm being entirely honest, right? So those two kind of are married together in my brain, at least thematically and story wise, archetype wise. They're just joined, right? And maybe this is part of the boringness of being a fighter in my mind. Like I'm almost certain if we had made 3 fighters, there would not have been this level of character in the game, like personalities and all this kind of stuff. Like because every time we made a choice, it was like in choosing one thing for our character, we negated 5. And then every time we did that, that was 5 more things that went away, and it made our character. It gave a voice, it gave a personality, it gave, in a lot of cases, a look and a feel to the character, because we chose, when you choose one in this very specific archetype, a lot of things go away. Does it make sense?
How so? Can you give me like an example?
So my character is this matronly, motherly character. I'm sort of like the head of the coven in a lot of ways, right? I'm the moral compass, or lack thereof, maybe would be a better term. And so I had this, when I chose that, I chose, in my mind, I made a matronly character, right? So I'm a little bit older, so that, but not, I'm not a crone, but I'm not a young person either. I'm not the fatale and I'm not the virgin, right? So that sort of categorizes my age, right? Mm-hmm. And then I thought I want to be motherly, so I didn't go with like conventional beauty traits, right? I'm not like thin and voluptuous or anything, right? I described my character as being sort of like Rubenesque or whatever. And so that was another choice that sort of pared things down. And every time it sharpened the edge of what my character's personality became, because each of those things and sort of informed it formed one another. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that really answers
Really
the
a little insulted
question.
that you don't think of mothers as voluptuous, because a girl doesn't really get good birth and hips until after you birth a baby. And
I don't disagree. But see, my mind works in those archetypal things, right?
Right. No, I
and
get
so
what you're saying.
in my family, the mothers in the family are Rubenesque women. That's what it is, right? So, that's just how my family is, The inspiration for this, where I was trying to get as I thought about this episode was, I really like that character. I like the dynamic between the three different characters, right? And I thought, I don't know if we would be able to have the same experience or same depth of character or depth of relationship between one another as characters if you had just said, hey, we're going to play a D&D game and you're going to be in Jourdain, France. Mm-hmm. Go.
No, I definitely don't think you would have.
That's what I'm trying to get to, I suppose. This has been a big lead up to that. So how do we make that happen without manufacturing a very, very specific moment? Or is it even possible without that?
First of all, there was some backstory aside from you're just in Jourdain, France.
Okay, so there's some preparation put in by the DM.
I gave you a mythology, and I think there are not enough games that start with good mythology. I gave you more than just whatever you worship Luna,
right?
And you're a witch. That's where your power's derived from,
right?
I gave you a whole story about her and her husband and how they had a falling out and he cursed her and by rights she cursed him. And so you have more than just, you have kind of an emotional place almost to start
I agree.
from.
So let me put a counterpoint to this. Do you think if you had said two of you have to be witches and one of you has to be sort of like a guardian character, a protector, that we would have still had the same depth?
I also don't think as much, but it would have been better than just
make characters
here's a 3-part D&D party. It's the difference between me saying, okay, whatever, you're starting in Greece, make 3 D&D characters go, or you're starting in Greece and you're a secret coven serving the Order of Persephone.
Okay.
That changes the kind of character that you decide you want to make.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me do this then. So the witch game we have, we're a coven or a cult or however you want to phrase that, right?
I said coven. Cult has a lot of associated negativity.
Tomato, potato, whatever.
you guys
okay,
are
right.
definitely good guys.
Clearly, we're the good guys. Anyway, but the example you mentioned, you're a cult of Persephone, right? But that's still a group of people organized under one cause of some religious sort, right? So setting aside this sort of religious belief narrative, right? Do you think that you could do that, set up parameters that would develop the same level of characters without that kind of belief in something larger than them? Well, let me give you an example, right? So the Musketeers, they're all Musketeers.
Yeah.
They are all drastically different. And it's impossible to argue that people don't love that story. Okay? It's crazy successful.
Mostly because of Porthos.
It's been made and made and made and made. True story. But either way, which one was played by Malkovich?
No, he doesn't play one of the Musketeers, does he? I thought he played D'Artagnan's father.
No, he's D'Artagnan's father, but he's also Musketeer.
Right.
Athos?
Maybe?
I like him the best.
That seems reasonable.
Him and Porthos are the ones I like the best. Either way.
But, nobody ever likes the Jesuits.
No, the Jesuit is the other one.
Yeah, no, I know. That's why I said nobody ever picks the Jesuit.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. In that case, again, I guess I come back. I think you could really view the Musketeers as a cult of the king in a way, right? Mm-hmm. So is it that if you're going to do this, you have to pick something that has a larger meaning to life or the character's life or the world or morality or something?
I think that's definitely part of it. I think the fact that there was a specific mission to accomplish that is not go slay the king over here. I gave you guys something difficult to accomplish, right? In fact, knowingly impossible to accomplish, but
how long can you
do
prolong
the best
it?
you can,
right?
And that's kind of where the Musketeers are at too, right? It's almost like
protect the king as long as you can, right?
It's the best part of an underdog story wrapped up with some just interesting mythology.
Oh,
and everybody loves an underdog.
I like that analogy. That's a good analogy.
But it's just cleverly disguised,
right? No, I agree. When you frame it up that way, it makes a lot of sense. I guess where I go back to is it's like we all want to differentiate our characters to make them individual, right? Mm-hmm. No one wants to be like, I'm Rogue One and you're Rogue Two and whatever, right? Oh, you failed your find traps, I'll roll mine. That's boring, right? That's a war game. Maybe it's just a change of mindset because you could very easily develop the same depth of character playing a fighter in a group of regular characters as you would if we all made essentially fighters in a musketeer group, right? Mm-hmm.
I just feel like you need mythology and you need goals. I just think it's easier to find a motivation to give your characters those things if I take away the obvious things that make you different.
Because then you have to draw starker contrasts between the two characters.
Yeah. It's just like, so like, I don't know if this is going to sound dumb or whatever, but like I work in a place that has uniforms, right? So what do? I wear funky socks. You know, it's like you have to find something like some minor rebellion.
I would argue that you work in a place that wears pajamas, not uniforms, but
they're pajama uniforms.
Fair enough. I'll concede that fact. So
I see the same thing like when you force kids to go to like, you know, a Catholic school and you're all wearing the same uniform. So it's like, oh, well, I'm going to do my hair this special way, or I'm going to get highlights, or I'm going to pierce my ear like so, or...
Okay. So I think you're totally right, and I think we've drilled this down to the sort of essence of it, right? The fact that you are all the same means that you have to draw starker distinctions between one another to sort of flesh out your character and make you an individual, right? Because no one wants to play a photocopy.
You can't be obviously different, so you have to be uniquely different.
Right. So is there a way necessarily to apply that same logic to when we make a party of people in a fantasy game versus if we're just making musketeers or making witches or making Firefly characters or whatever in like that Apocalypse World stuff? Or is it, so okay, let me change this around a little bit. Let me rephrase this a little differently. In those examples that we talked about, right, the witches and the musketeers, right? Because those are I think those are two good examples because they're very far apart, right? One is magic, one is mundane, right? Both of those cases, though, that is work and things that the GM has front-loaded into this to say, these are the conceits of the game. Make what you want, but operate within this conceit of the game. Okay? Is there a way, as a player, if the GM doesn't do that and just says, hey, I'm going to run a D&D game or a One Ring game in the Tolkien universe? Is there a way to set that up on your own as a character when you make your initial character to draw that sort of depth together? Or is it the fact that I'm sitting around a table with 3 or 4 other people that are making musketeers that draws that difference out of my character? Does it make sense?
Yeah. I think a lot of it does come from just playing the character and building, but I think you can get some of that from, we've talked before about creating character goals. We talk about it a lot. And that is part of it, but you also need to have a compelling backstory. So when I think about like...
You have goals, but why?
Right. So think about someone who's a refugee, right? Think about, like, in your head, what would it actually take to get you, as yourself, as a person right now, to go outside of your door and not know when you might come back, to leave and go into another land?
Right.
Like, what would be so motivating and compelling to me to get me actually off my ass, stop watching Netflix, leave my job,
right,
possibly leave my family behind? What would be so important to motivate me to do something like that? And then I think you might have a good start.
Let's just presume that that's the best approach.
Maybe, I don't know. I feel like that sounded really drastic after I said it. Maybe you don't.
No. Well, I think it's
behind a mom nursing a baby infant or anything.
Right,
but you know what I'm saying. Like, what motivates you to do more than the average hobbit? Why are you leaving the Shire, Frodo? Hobbits don't do this.
Right.
What's the story?
You have this world-breaking ring. Yeah. Assuming that is 100% correct, right? And that's the best way to go about it. I think the average gaming group, right, probably makes more games than they finish. You think that's fair to say?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I agree. So is there a certain point of fatigue that we have gotten to where maybe we used to do this, but now we don't because this is the 15th wizard that I've made this year? So it's like, cool, 6th level wizard, ka-chunk, here he is. He's a wizard. What does he do? He studies. He's bookish. Let's roll some dice. Is there like a sort of like a player fatigue to it in that I've made 15 wizards now and I'm just you only have...
I get some genre fatigue in general, and that I think is part of it. But another part is just lack of compelling story. So think about really how many games you sat down and you've made characters for where the GM probably didn't really have a story in mind, and you were just kind of like playing, or like maybe the wizard, whatever, was in control of this dungeon and evil goblin army, but that's really all the thought that there was. There was no plan after that.
Right.
There was no really forethought other than powerful level 10 wizard, tiny level 1 character peons.
Go. Right.
So I think, like, most of the games that we failed to play, again, aside from scheduling conflicts of general adulthood,
right,
where games have dissolved, like games that just didn't get picked back up were ones that either the story wasn't compelling or I didn't know enough of what you had in mind to be
right,
interested in the story. Like, we have this, the DM screen and all this secretness, and you can't know what I'm planning. But if you don't give me something to hold on to, then I don't have any interest in continuing to play this game. Or maybe it's kind of interesting enough to play, but given 2 weeks, I've forgotten about it entirely.
Right. Well, I think it ties back to Lee ran a World of Darkness game where we were like had no recollection of our history,
and it could have been really cool, but it was so frustrating because I had no idea what the plan was after that.
Well, and my issue came down to Lee had said, "Well, you never kind of did what I thought you would do," and I wasn't trying to be obstructive. I just didn't know what to do because generally speaking, if you lay breadcrumbs in front of me, I'll probably follow them. That's I'm here to have a good time and hear and be part of a story and change things and do things and whatever. And I think part of that sometimes is making the conceit that I will follow where the story naturally leads and not be intentionally obstructive to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think I'm not even going to put all that on him either, because the only other player character he had was Carrie. Mm-hmm. And Carrie had made a character that was naturally adversarial. So if you're trying to hook other players into a plot line right, with an adversarial PC, it's not working really well. It was like oil and water,
Oh, yeah. All right, well, I think we could probably sit here and talk around in circles about this all night.
Do you feel like I answered your question?
I do in a way.
I don't know that I have the answer for your question, because you guys made those characters as much as, I just created a story for you.
Right. Well, I think it comes down to the fact, I guess the reason why I posed the question to you was because while we made characters that sort of were very well fleshed out, and I felt like were well developed and compelling characters, you were the one that laid the foundation for us to do that. So that's where I kind of came back to, how did we get there? Because you just said...
Honestly, there was some curiosity on my part, because I started with this idea of the mythology and the coven. And then I was like, well, what if I just make you guys all make witches? And then I was like, well, what if I just make you guys all play females? You guys usually play dudes. What if I just force you to play a female character? I wonder what will happen. I bet it will be interesting. And that's really all of the thought that went into to that portion of it.
Right.
Because I just thought it might end up interesting. I don't know. I wonder if some of it, too, isn't just me forcing you to do something you wouldn't normally do.
I think that's part of it. I really do. But so the thing that I was going to mention was that I played in an Ultramere game before, which is very similar to what you set up in this case, right? We are Ultramere in a chantry, and we all had to find a way to sort of distinguish ourselves from one another. And a lot of times in a vampire game, that comes down to what disciplines you choose, right? But even in that case, we were all forced to take Path of Blood initially. So our discipline choices were very, very limited, because those are choices that sort of inform your character, like what occult things are you going to pursue, right? Which sort of leads into powers and that kind of stuff, which kind of sort of displays your personality a little bit in a way, right? But even still, we were all very different in that case. Now, I don't think that we were necessarily as developed as those witch characters, but there were also, I believe, 5 or 6 of us around the table. And maybe the sweet spot is having those restrictions and having between 2 and 4 players as opposed to 4 and 6, right? Because the more people you add, the harder it is. You know, like there's more spotlight to share, essentially, right? I think really what it comes down to is the fact that you put constraints on us initially, and then you trusted in us to make interesting characters. So it's a sort of like push and pull that happens, right? So you come up with a compelling world and lay out some guidelines and some restrictions, and then say make something interesting. But in a way, you also let our characters inform the world as well, because the choices we made kind of, I felt like at least, sort of changed the world. Maybe not the storyline, but at least the world that we were existing in, right? Mm-hmm. I guess maybe in a way, you put restrictions on us initially for the characters we made, and then we developed these characters and these personalities, which sort of, in a way, put restrictions back on you. And I don't know if that's just my brain sort of trying to make close the loop or close the circle on that one.
I don't feel restricted at all.
Well, no, I mean, you're the game master in the situation, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like where we sort of started to talk about how our coven worked and what we were going to do, and in a way, you making the conceit that we get to design our own coven and what our, not what our larger purpose is, but maybe how our coven works, that sort of shaped our worldview and how we were going to interact with the world, and then how it would respond back to us. So I guess maybe it's just restrictions create
different
creative moments.
Yeah. That you wouldn't, have just different situations you wouldn't have placed yourself in on your own.
Mm-hmm. So is it worth breaking them then? Do you think it would have, because I mentioned before, if we had 2 witches and then like 1 protector character, is that worth pursuing if you have someone that is just absolutely like, I'm not going to make a wizard or whatever? Or is it just suck it up, Buttercup?
I mean, I kind of just want to say suck it up, Buttercup, but then I don't know, I guess I'm curious, like, why is this person so diabolically opposed to being a wizard? Okay. Like, what is it about wizards that you hate so much that you're like, just, no.
Right.
No, I don't care what your game plot is. I'm just not doing it. Like, what happened bad in your past that involved wizards that now you're, like, afraid of the wizard character? So, yeah, I don't know. I guess I would have to have a conversation. I'm not saying it would be a hard no. I would be irritated.
Right. Well, and as I sit here and think about it, like when you look at other games like Knights Black Agents, right? You're all super spies. You're all Jason Bourne. Mm-hmm. So how do you make yourself special from every other Jason Bourne? If you're playing Trail of Cthulhu, you're all occult investigators. So what is your specialty that you investigate in the occult, right? That might be the best example of like how narrow of a sliver you can make this, right? Like I'm a master of like Etruscan linguistics, right? Like how thin of a sliver can you make your specialty, right? But at the same time, still relevant, hopefully, to the story, because the skills that you choose sort of dictate what the game should be revolving around, right?
Right. Yeah, that's putting some real constraints on the storyteller.
Well, yeah.
You're like, oh, well, I guess we're...
Well, it's easy in Call of Cthulhu, though, because it's like, oh, so you speak Enochian. Okay, cool. This script is in Enochian, right? You know, yeah, or something similar enough for you to be able to discern it. Like, that's super easy and not hard to do. But I think that's a great example of something that pares things down even thinner, because generally speaking, there's not a lot of thugs that you play in Call of Cthulhu. You play the investigators, not the hitman. You know what I mean?
Tell you something that I'm thinking about right now, though, and you tell me what you think about this on this topic of character constraints. So, in World of Darkness games, you mentioned playing a Tremere, and you would normally, dissociate each other by what thaumaturgy path you chose, or maybe you didn't choose a thaumaturgy path out the gate, God forbid.
Right.
What kind of weird Tremere are you?
We had a dominate Tremere in the group.
I have always liked in World of Darkness when you make a World of Darkness mortal character first.
Right.
Because the background is infinitely more fleshed out, because you're forced to think about who you were as a human.
Before.
What are your
So in that Tremere game, that's actually what we did. We had one person who wasn't an actual mage, but they had a life around mages, right? Mm-hmm. So they themselves weren't like an imbued or whatever. I can't remember what the awakened, but they were exposed to that kind of stuff, right? And that was their background. So we had someone who had sort of like a magical background.
But there is no narrowing of decision in that. In fact, you could argue that that's making decisions more open because now you're not isolated Tremere. You could be literally any kind of mortal.
Yeah, that's true.
Immortal, but
that's true.
You can be any kind of human.
No, I agree with that. Yeah. So in that case, because we had very different backgrounds, because my character was sort of like this demonologist, kind of character, and then we had a character who had sort of like they weren't awakened, but they were an awakened background. We had another character who was just always a Tremere acolyte. So I
guess what I'm thinking then is perhaps it's not adding character constraints. Perhaps it's forcing you to go through character creation in a different way than you normally do or than you had anticipated.
I think it sort of circles around back to where it's almost like a chicken or the egg thing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I don't know, I'm just wondering because that's not really putting constraints on you. Maybe it is. It's like a power constraint, I guess, kind of, because you're immortal, but...
Well, it's a constraint in the fact that it says that your character has to conform to this initial conceit of the game, which is you are a Tremere, right? So you can be any Tremere you want to be, but you have to be a Tremere.
I feel like you get a better background in history if you make a mortal first. If you make a human first.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that.
First.
Well, you know what?
More open decision.
So let me ask you this. You only have so much mental energy to spend on things, right? So is it better characters because the GM has said, don't think about all the other clans or all the other classes. Think about this one. Make something good that is this one. So that means you don't have to spend all this energy thinking, do I want to make the Anarch Bruja? I don't think so. Do I want to make the CEO Ventrue? I don't think so.
It's that when I think about a vampire clan, I define the clans as being different from each other by what abilities they have. Even if each one is, has its own whatever stereotype. Like Bruja, they have their own vice, their own virtue, and each clan has that. But when it really comes down to it, I think about what discipline package that clan comes with. And if you say, I'm making immortal, and then suddenly I'm thinking more about who this person is and what their personality is, as opposed to what kind of superpowers they have.
True. But I do think it's okay to make the conceit that if you're in the World of Darkness thing, right? It stands to reason to me that if you had an entire group of people that all developed the same superpowers, they would have kind of the same pursuits because they can all wreck things in the same way. Do you know what I mean?
I guess.
So I think it kind of creates this, I don't know, culture or something that, I think it makes sense to have the clans sort of structured they would do in a way because that's how you guys fix problems with your supernatural powers, right? I have potence. I punch holes in walls. That's what I do, So I don't know. I wasn't sure that we would come to a conclusion on this one. It's kind of just like an interesting thought experiment to see how to make more compelling characters. I don't know. It's just a weird thing because at the same time I've made compelling characters that had no constraints put on me. So I was just kind of like, where did this initial spark come from that we had all the characters in that game had a compelling storyline? And I think it's a lot of things. It's constraints put on you by the game master, creative collaboration between the players, and then decisions the players made, the GM incorporating into the world, which is a big way to say play the game as a group.
It was a super happy accident.
I suppose. So I guess hopefully you guys got something out of this. I don't know. I guess the lesson here is collaborate, and then have the game master perhaps develop some kind of cohesive story to lay out as some guidance for how to structure your game and your characters, and then go from there. Does that make sense?
Seems reasonable.
Fair enough. All right, so as you guys know, we are a member of the Gun and Geek Network, so a quick promo for All Things Good and Nerdy, episode 355. Subtle like a hurricane. The hype is building for the latest Avengers flick, and All Things Good and Nerdy is no exception. This week, Chris has the details on the 59-hour Marvel movie marathon, that's a lot to say all at once, being carried out by the Alamo Drafthouse and AMC. Willie shares the latest rules of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments, and finally, Anthony has all the latest comic casting news. To wrap things up, we have the latest installment of Unprotected Advice with Willie D. Nelson. So you can check them out. That's All Things Good and Nerdy, episode 355, and you can find them on the Gonna Geek Network. Like I said before, thanks for hanging out for us today, whatever it is, wherever you're at listening to this. And I don't know, just give us your thoughts on how you structure character creation to make things not how to structure character creation to make a good game, but how to structure it to make compelling characters. Because I feel like if you have compelling characters, that does almost all of the heavy lifting for you, because every interesting story has interesting characters. There's no story that exists that has flat characters. It's a great story, right?
There's the catcher in the rye.
You would argue that that's not a great story.
It's not.
So
It sure has some staying power.
I don't mind. All right, so I think that'll do it for us this week. If you guys like what we do here, you can support us at patreon.com/justonemorefix and get access to our quarterly zine, our raw audio feeds, and pre-shows, as well as all of the Troubadours playtest stuff as we continue to develop that. And you can join the ranks of awesome Patreon supporters like Alistair H., Tiziano Furlano, Simon McNair, Alan White, and the OG Todd Olson. That'll do it for us, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks for listening. This has been an episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at incompetech.com. You can support us at patreon.com/justonemorefix or follow us on Twitter at JustOneMoreFix.